So hi everyone, this is Akash here. Today I'll just tell you the reasons why, or let's say the rationale for starting companies and why someone has to do it. And if someone were to, take this journey up, what are the circumstances that you will sort of endure as a result of which you have to make certain decisions. I'll give you a framework or a general paradigm to think about these issues. So I just have a bunch of slides. At any point in time, if you have any questions, you can put these questions up in the chat and I'll be happy to answer them. You don't have to wait until the end of the talk. The talk will be about 30-45 minutes. So we'll keep up the time. At the same time, feel free to interrupt me and ask questions in between. So the idea here is how to build companies from ideas. So the main aspects in business model is basically there are three things that you require for a company to work. You need an innovation, you need a business model, and you need some sort of target demographic that you can go after, meaning a customer segment, or you have to figure out a way to reach that customer segment in an innovative way. So if these three things come together, you have a successful company. There are a bunch of details that I've mentioned on this PPT. Not all of it will be covered. If you have any questions on any of the words that you see on the PPT, please do question. I gave this talk in IIT Dharwad probably a month ago. So this is a similar talk, but this time we can get into more business aspects of it as opposed to innovation aspect. Either way, all three of these components are essential for a business to function. If one of these don't work, there is a very good chance that whatever you're trying to do might not succeed. So I'll just give you a general analogy as to why business models are important. In the early 2000s, there was a lot of competition between Google Docs and Microsoft Office. Microsoft Office had almost 70% market share. So any new entrant in the document space had a hard task competing with Microsoft. So what Google did was they came up with an interesting business model innovation. So business model would be, I'm talking about, I don't know if you can, so this aspect of it. So I'll be going back and forth from these screens. So this is the BM, right? So they did business model innovation. So business model innovation would essentially be going to customers directly and giving them the ability to share their documents without any cost. Clients. Even the Google Docs are even now free for retail customers. So this was their go-to-market strategy. So they did not do any innovation. They did not do any innovation, or they did not figure out new segment altogether. But they figured out an interesting business model. Whenever I say business model, always think about how you're charging money to the customer. Okay. So you have a different way to charge money to the customer. Microsoft Office, you had to charge money by buying a package. Since the package was very high, not many people paid the money, and a lot of people use pirated products. So they figured out an interesting Are you able to share this? See the screen again? Hello?
Sir, yes, it is visible.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, there was slight disruption. Okay, so this is what I call a good business. Okay, it's like standard definition. It's sort of like, say, customize and improvise to whatever I think is a good business. A good business is or a great business is has a simple, predictable, free cash flow business with durable competitive advantage with significant barriers to entry, which assigns capital, which is debt or equity, intelligently to maximize growth. So this is essentially how I talk about things to people. Like if I look at any given business, does it have a simple revenue model? Is it predictable? Predictable is a very hard thing to ensure. Some predictability ensures that you have a durable competitive advantage. So the 4 is a precondition to 2. And free cash flow businesses, you have to make money hand over fist. That means every transaction that you do has to be gross profitability positive. So you can ask what these definitions are. I'll get to it if you have any doubts. And you have to maximize growth, right? You have to expand, and you need to have a management team which builds governance structure. Governance structure is essentially how you charge money to your customers. Governance doesn't mean, do something to society or things of that nature. Governance just means, can you build a business model which is sustainable for a durable time period, in order for you to allocate cash properly? That is what governance is all about. Can you ensure that? And the management team's sole responsibility to ensure that you have a durable competitive advantage for the foreseeable future. And 8 is execute. You need to execute all the plans that you do. I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower who said, all plans are dead, only something of the, I'm just paraphrasing here. All plans are dead except planning is the only thing that succeeds. Meaning, every plan that you make essentially gets into an obstacle. But the thing is, planning is a continuous process that you plan something and you encounter an obstacle and you change your course. That process is what management team does. So these are things that I've just given. These are diagrams that I made just to understand. This is what I call a competitive moat, right? You have a fort, you have water around the fort, and you have these poisonous crocodiles trying to push away any competitor. So essentially what I'm trying to say is, all the companies in the world are on some cost curve. So I'm talking about a demand curve here, I'm talking about a supply curve, wherein this is a spectrum of costs that you can incur to get a product to market. Now you will, as a new entrant into the field, you will hit some cost point. Now your ability to modify that enables you to get into the business. So I'm giving you some history about the entire economic history of the world, essentially. So when you think about countries and companies, they essentially do the same thing. Okay, there was some disturbance here. So when you think about countries and companies, they essentially do the same thing. So you figure out a way to specialize in some meaningful way. It can be services or manufacturing or advanced technology. You figure out what your secret sauce is as a company or as a country. You figure out how to get raw materials for your country or your company, and you trade, right? You trade and you get those raw materials so that you can build that economic structure. And this was true in the Dutch East India Company, English East India Company, the empires of the Americas, and the rise of China. So I've given question mark for rise of China and rise of India, because we are not sure that we will be an empire at par with those previous empires, but that is something that needs to be answered in the next century. So what I'm trying to say is, as and when incomes rise, when companies trade and become wealthy, the incomes rise. Incomes rise leads to people who trade and who handle capital becoming richer than people who do not trade and engage in commerce being poorer. As a result of which there is social inequality, as a result of which this is true within the country, this is true across countries. So poor countries borrow too much money from rich countries, they default on their debt. Every time there is a default, there is either a civil war or an international world war. and debts are settled like the way it was settled in 1944 Bretton Woods, wherein they made a pact as to how to settle the debt of the defeated countries. And the cycle repeats. The same thing is happening from 1945 till now. The world order, which was set then, has gone on. We have to figure out how long this will go on. Now, the Indian ecosystem is sort of interesting. Last time I made this deck, there was 96 unicorns. Now the number has reached 100 last time I checked. And there are about 350 companies with a valuation of about $1 billion in India, which are listed, right? And 450 companies overall, which have the tag of being the unicorn. So I'm giving you the ecosystem details. I'll get to the business model slightly later. So I'm giving you the ecosystem details as to why now is a good time to start companies. So, and private startup unicorns as a percentage is 21%, meaning 100 out of 450 is 21. And that is supposed to grow, right? If you look at NSC, it has 2,000 companies, and every 2-3 years, 200 companies get delisted and new companies get added. So eventually, all these unicorns will be listed in NSC, right? And what will happen is these unicorns, which are privately held companies, will become the publicly listed companies of the future. So this number, 21%, was 5% in 2015. So it is going to be 20, 30, probably 50% in another 5 years. So that means, because there are a bunch of factors that pave the way for it: younger population, stable government, trust in foreign investors to park 10 billion every year. So the question then arises, should you start companies in college when you're in college, maybe be it master's degree or a bachelor's degree? And the answer is, of course, you should, because you have the least amount of risk provided. You're stable enough to lead teams and form teams which have complementary skill sets. And again, I mentioned this point, and I would like to reiterate and underline this, that technology is almost irrelevant unless you invent something totally new, like a personal computer or something. Technology is the least important part of this cobweb, shall we put it that way? Because you need essentially an interesting way to provide value. And again, I can come back to the same slide that I showed in slide 2, because again, what I was trying to explain, the business environment is where all these three operate. So if you have an interesting business model, or if you have an interesting way to reach people, you will make a lot of money. So figure out, innovation is hard, and usually people who innovate don't end up making the money. The first person who invented the internal combustion engine never made any money on it. Neither did the people who invented the personal computer. So people who figure out the business model and customer segmentation usually make bulk of the revenue. So, this is a rough way to figure out if we have to create value and deliver value and also harness value proposition to other people, then the question arises how to do it and why to do it, right? There is, you have to take these points into consideration. You need to figure out the time to market, whether there is, you need to be able to adapt to the market that you're in. And also you have to figure out a way to make your business strategy sort of sustainable. And I've listed what the founder's main job is. The founder's main job is to ensure the money that you have is properly spent in an efficient manner, and build a business which is 10x. So this is like broadly what you're trying to do when you start a company, right? A business creates X dollars of value and captures Y% of X. So basically, I'm talking about, what is that diagram? So there are these concepts called total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and SAM. So you guys can look up what it essentially means. Total addressable market would be the eventual market that you have to get to, and this is what you can actually reach. I'll get to the details of this if there are any questions on this. But essentially, think of this as the overall market, meaning the overall potential of the market that exists. Like pharma industry is about 6 billion in India, very small market compared to US, which is probably like $1 trillion, right? It's almost like how much is it? 100 times bigger than India. So there's a lot of potential to grow. This is a way by which you can figure out whether you're in the right market or not. Better, it would be a good idea if you are in a market which is small and growing rapidly and is quite obvious. Then you know for sure that it will grow. Now, there are aspects of the paradigm that I want to communicate here. So there is a idea in economics by the name perfect competition. Usually people think competition is good for the economy, good for the companies, because when companies compete, customers get fair value. I don't know if I have the graph somewhere. Oh, I think I've not had the graph. So I wanted to show you customer surplus. I think it was there in one of the graphs, but I forgot. But if you've taken Econ Micro 101, I think you would encounter what there is a concept called customer surplus. So companies have to create customer surplus in order for consumers to pay. Now, if that is the value proposition that companies bring to the table, then you figure out how to do it efficiently. The thing that I want to communicate here is perfect competition, even though it is termed as a virtue, is not a virtue for the founder. Perfect competition is very easy to model because you think, okay, I have to show, you think perfect competition would mean there is a company here, there's a company here, there's a company here, there's a company here, and you have your company, which is actually not the right way to think about it. Perfect competition is absolutely bad for the companies if you're starting out a new company. So when you're starting out a new company, you should always think for a monopoly. Even though it's a a pejorative word which has negative connotations attached to it, you should always think if you build something, you need to have a monopoly. Aim for 70 to 80% market share, then you have a chance to even hit 5% market share 20 years down the line, right? If you cannot do, if you cannot envision a company which can hit 5% market share 20 years down the line, don't even start the company. So anything you do, you need to aim for monopoly. It need not be a national monopoly. It can be a domestic monopoly in a very small city, in a very small college, but figure out a way that you're the only player in that space doing the thing. There should be no competitors. Only then you can succeed as a company. If you start out being in the perfect competition, you'll never win. If there's too much competition, don't even enter. So another way to say it is, I think Peter Thiel has this quote wherein he says, competition is for losers. If you want to build a new company, do something that nobody else is doing so that you have stable, long-term competitive advantage, right? And that is your job. You have to figure out what that competitive advantage is in the future that you will build and foresee, and ensure that you don't have competition in the vicinity. So I'll just run through this. So you can always think of companies as a spectrum, where on the one end of the spectrum, there's perfect competition, and on the other end of the spectrum, there is monopoly. You should aim to be a monopoly. And, you can get into, always people, all companies lie. And it's just true. Not that it's a wrong thing, but the thing is they have to, Google says that it doesn't have monopoly in any space because it calls itself a technology company, which isn't true, right? Google funds all its projects because of the monopoly they have at search business. They have like 70% monopoly on all searches. Because of that, they can do everything else. So they call themselves technology companies because they have one thing that they do better than anybody else. So this goes back to the fact that you have to always aim for monopoly. You should do one thing. You should be hyper specialized in one thing that allows you to enter the market and stay in the market for a long period of time. This was some data that I took probably in 2013, 14. But this essentially conveys the point, right? So because they have monopoly in search, they have all these revenues. Global advertising revenue is 500 billion, US advertising 150. They own probably about 100 billion of advertising revenue, and they've now diversified into a lot of other businesses. So again, technology is very generic, right? Everything is technology. Is there any company in the world which is not a technology company? There isn't. So this whole notion that some companies are technology companies and some companies are non-technology companies is a logical fallacy. And you have to figure out as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you have to figure out where are the logical fallacies, where there are gaps in the system that you can fill by building a viable business. Now, again, I said the same thing. You start small and you monopolize, even if it is a small area, right? A neighborhood or a small college, right? If you're providing some service in the college, you have to be the only service provider in that college. And then you figure out a way to get to the city in which you're in, and then you get to the state you're in and country, things of that nature. Always build small and monopolize, and always figure out a way to maintain cost. Never hire people unless they are working towards product market fit. I'll get to what product market fit is in a bit. I think I have to hurry up a bit because it's taking a little longer than what I intended. So early stage company, the funding for criteria for investors is they only look at if I mean, this is a slide for people who want to raise money. Basically, you're betting on the founder, the unique insights that the founder brings to the table, and how you want to look at how big the company can get. Now, let me hide this. Okay, so again, I'm reiterating the same point that I made earlier, wherein I'm saying that you have to start small and expand over a period of time, and then again, I can read these quotes, but I think they convey the same essential idea. So this is a little conceptual. I mean, you must, if you've read econ, at least the micro part, this is what I call an externality. This is essentially a positive externality. So what externalities are externalities are a dispersion from socially efficient, how do I put it? Okay, there is social need, and there is an actual need, right? Meaning like, okay, I think I'm misstating this. There is actual social requirement, and then there is an actual market provided need. And usually there is gap between what the market provides and what the society needs. Now that gap is externality. Now, if it is a positive externality, it results in advertise. You can improve. You can go from this point. This point. Am I able to? You guys are able to see the cursor, right? So this point. Okay, this point where. Can you guys please mute? Because hearing a lot of disturbance. Yashwant, can you mute everybody?
Sure, sir.
Okay. So usually this is where the current status quo is, and if you feel like the actual societally efficient allocation is here, then what you can do, you can figure out a way to solve this positive externality by advertising your brand. Again, for the things that I'm trying to say, you should understand what a welfare loss is. You should understand what a consumer surplus is. If you know what those are, I think the concepts that I'm trying to explain will become easier. I don't want to delve too much into it. If some of the people would have taken this in econ, some would not have. So if you have any questions on this, I'll get back to this slide. Essentially, all startups have some societal need that they're trying to fulfill. Now, you can put every startup in this sort of a diagram, essentially, and say that, okay, this company solves this externality, this company solves that externality. You can essentially make statements that way. I can get to that. So, okay, this is the slide I was looking at. See, all these companies, when they start out, they all want to solve some problem of society, as a result of which there is enough consumer surplus, and at the same time, there is enough producer surplus too. Producer surplus is the margins that the companies make when they get into business. So let's suppose that we are a company and the current equilibrium is around here. You provide some service wherein you push the equilibrium here, and you whatever welfare loss that you're trying to solve is your profit. Okay. Can you please mute? I mean, yeah. So characteristics of a monopoly, you need to have a proprietary technology, you need to have network effects, economies of scale, you need to build a brand. So I think Buffett has this video wherein he explains whether it's a good idea to invest in utilities or it is a good idea to invest in consumer durable companies, and which one of these investments is a good investment. Buffett says consumer brands are an efficient business as opposed to utilities like an electricity company or a port company or an oil and drilling company, for the simple reason that they don't have receivables and they don't have long duration payables, as a result of which they can the inventory management for a consumer durable brand company is more solvable business than some company which has long duration receivables where some of your suppliers default on a regular basis. I can get into the details if you have any questions on this. So this diagram is the most important diagram for any founder starting any company. What I'm trying to say here in this diagram is, if you need to get into a business and then you have to grow faster than the rate at which you borrow money. So rate at which you borrow money is cost of capital. Cost of capital is a weighted average of cost of debt and cost of equity. And if your cost of capital is, let's say, 15%, and if your growth rate is less than that, you should not even start the company. So you should have a discounted cash flow model of a company even before you start the company. I would say, I mean, it's not, you need not be this aggressive, but if we have to be super detailed about how you plan, which is how I do things, some founders don't engage in such level of detail. But if you're somebody who plans properly, it's a good idea to have a discounted cash flow model even before you start a company and look at whether it's viable or not. And the number one thing that you look at is the rate at which you borrow money should be less than the rate at which you have potential to grow. And you can only model for 5 to 7 years, because anything above 7 years, you cannot, the discounting factor is totally unpredictable. And so shorter time horizon, 5 to 7 year model has to be done even before. And the key thing is the rate at which you discount. Now, I'll give you a simple example as to what is happening. Due to inflation, I'll tell you why this is so important. If you understand this diagram, you'll figure out why all the growth companies right now, growth companies would mean companies which are not making money right now, but are supposed to make money in the future, are down 50% across the world. They're down 50% across the world because the interest rates are high. When the interest rates are, let's say, 3% as opposed to 0%, the rate at which you borrow is higher. So you were borrowing at, so you're borrowing at, let's say, R. Now that is translated to R plus 6 or R plus 8. Now, if this is the rate at which you borrow, this is the rate at which you also discount, right? Now, if this is the rate at which you discount, all the future growth is sort of wiped out, as a result of which equity value is decreased by half. So if you understand anything about markets, if you look at why the companies are all down in the publicly listed companies, publicly listed companies, essentially this is what has happened. The inflation is high enough to a point where future growth is discounted and equity is wiped out in half. I can get into the details if you want the calculation as to how I did it. But okay, the good, I mean, this is the market scenario that you have to understand if you're starting a company. But absent the market, there is a good way to start companies which are more riskier, but if they are successful, will become huge hits, like Tesla. Tesla is a classic example of a vertically integrated complex monopoly. So they are a technology company, they are an AI company, they are a car manufacturer, they are the biggest network of electric charging stations. So they have a charging station network company. They have semiconductor company which directly takes raw materials from mines. They are also a software company which makes their own AI. So you have like 6 or 7 companies put into one company, as a result of which Tesla is valued at 600 billion, and Elon owns 28%. So that will be what his net worth would be, about 200 billion. So the reason why he was able to be successful was he integrated 4 or 5 processes himself, because the rate at which he was able to grow was faster than what the suppliers were willing to offer. So he did a lot of things himself. So that's where economies of scale kick in, and anything that you make in the top line hits the bottom line directly, as long as the costs are controlled. So I'll quickly wrap up these 9 business models. If you're starting a business model now, you should probably be doing one of the 9 companies. Okay, these are all software-based companies that usually startups in at least the Indian market emerge. So these are the 9 business models. So enterprise SaaS, you might have a fair idea as to what these might be. If not, I'll just quickly make you understand what these are, and all the metrics that you have to understand. See, enterprise SaaS is, there is a big company like Google, Reliance, or any of these big companies, and you provide services for them. You provide software for them, right? The key thing here is you're selling it to big enterprises, so your receivables are always positive, meaning that you don't have long duration receivables, and you minimize the risk. So when you think about starting a company, it's you essentially minimizing risk when you do that to somebody, to a client of yours, like a big company here. So you solve Google's problem, they will give you the money as a customer to solve the problem. So any company which does this will be called an enterprise company. So here I've listed LOI, MOU, service. So these are the metrics that you have to look at. So when I say the key metrics in an enterprise company would be bookings. Bookings would be agreements that you go give a pitch, you create a letter of intent, and then over a period of time, if they have enough trust, look at your POC, you have a memorandum of understanding. After that, you get into a service level agreement with these enterprises to deliver some service or product to them that they use regularly and pay you. So the total customers and revenues, these are key performance indicators for an enterprise company. So the number of bookings you have, total customers, and revenue. So if you're a SaaS company, so you provide SaaS as a service. So I distinguish enterprise companies from SaaS because if you're providing SaaS software, the best example for this would be Zoho. It's an Indian company based in Tamil Nadu. They provide CRM, customer relationship management software. Along with that, they have all the functions wherein they give startups, MSMEs, software products, right? If you have an MSME needing any software, they are the people to go to. So the metrics that you look at for a SaaS company is monthly recurring revenue, because you provide some sort of a subscription, not a subscription service, but you have a recurring revenue model. Churn, meaning how many people get off your service, and cost of acquiring new customers. You can do paid advertising, various different things. So interesting. I don't know if I can write here. So there are only about 21 companies in the world which have. Can you please mute your? Yeah. There are only about 21 companies in the world which have more than $1 billion annual recurring revenue. This is not monthly recurring revenue, about annual recurring revenue in the entire world. So software as a service is very lucrative, but it's very competitive because the barriers to entry, which violates one of my principles that I stated, one of the 8 principles, the barrier to entry is very less. So a bunch of people can get together and start a SaaS company, but it's hard to get customers there. So usage-based business model, you're basically selling some API. You have some service, you can access somebody's API and pay them a fee based on the amount of requests that you kind of have. So a good example is Google Maps. Uber pays Google Maps money based on the kind of requests they have. So the key metrics here is monthly revenue, compounding growth rate, revenue retention. Retention is a very important word in the field of startups and software companies. Gross margin and paid CAC, customer acquisition cost. So paid CAC would be paid advertising that you engage in, wherein you can get customers from Facebook or Google. Subscription based is think of it as Netflix, Amazon Prime, things of that nature. Anything wherein you provide a cloud-based service, the cost of delivering that service is equal, and you only have to, ensure that your SaaS is your CAC meaning cost of acquiring customers is very less. And here the metrics are monthly recurring revenue and gross user churn. Transactional business model, again, these are big hit in India. They charge about 1 to 2.5% for every transaction volume. These are all the companies that I've listed. Again, here, total transaction volume isn't important. User retention is important. Paid CAC is important. Marketplace, again, these are offline to online models. You have something in the real world which connects to the offline world, housing, eBay, all these things. So there's a gross merchandise value, net CMGR is essentially the rate at which you grow net revenue, okay, not revenue, because you cannot consider GMV as revenue. Only the money that hits your bank is the revenue, and the amount of user retention you get. And you charge a transaction fee of about 10%, as opposed to a payment company which charges 1 to 2.5%. You charge about 10% because you help customers meet a potential client, right? Practo is one such example. It's a marketplace business. E-commerce, you sell something on the Amazon is a classic example of this. Flipkart is a classic example of this. So you have the difference between, okay, what's the difference between, good question for someone like me would be, if you understand what I'm trying to say, there's a difference between recurring revenue business and a marketplace business. Marketplace businesses can be seasonal because you only book Airbnb in December or in summer, right? So you'll have a lot of revenue coming in April, May, June, and you'll have a lot of revenue in the month of December, Jan, but you'll have very less revenue all the other months. So you don't measure recurring revenue in a marketplace business. So is the case, but here you measure growth, but you don't measure recurring revenue because you don't purchase something on e-commerce on a regular basis, right? It's not a habit-forming company. Advertising, these are Facebook, Twitters of the world, and you have active users, monthly active users, number of percentage of people who log in. Most business models here are usually like you put ads there and you monetize. Hardware, these are all very hard companies to get into. If you're in the consumer space, the kind of companies are Fitbit or GoPro. There's an Indian company which makes headphones. These are companies, again, there is no recurring revenue because it's a one-time purchase, and you have growth and you have margins. So meaning all transactions have to be gross margin positive, gross profitability positive. Like if you're not making gross profit, then don't even get into that business, right? Especially in hardware. You can take gross, you can do negative unit economics in marketplace business or e-commerce business, transaction business, if you are wise enough to know when to pull back. But if you're in hardware business, you cannot be gross profitability negative. I mean, it's just a death spiral because nobody will fund you otherwise. So these are the 9 business models that you can sort of pursue. Anything outside of these 9, don't even pursue it. It won't even work. If you're doing it, it will be like a moonshot. And that means it's 1 in 1,000 chance that you'll succeed. These 9 models also have 1 in 100 chance. So if you're not pursuing these, you probably have 1 in 1,000 chance. So what do we call a great business? Again, I'm repeating the things that I previously stated. All these business models are fit this paradigm or a template, as you can state it. You have a simple, predictable free cash flow business with durable competitive advantage, significant barriers to entry, assigns capital, debt, or usually equity, but debt also in a high interest rate environment where the yields are growing and you expect the inflation growth to be 5%, then what am I saying? Okay, so if the yield growth expectation is 5% or 5 to 10% in the next 18 months, it's good to raise equity. If the yield growth percent is not growing at all and the cost of debt is under 5%, you should probably raise debt because it's cheaper. But it depends on the geography you're in the developed economies. Raising debt to get a POC would be a wise choice. In a country like India, raising debt to get a POC would be suicidal. So it depends on which geography you're operating in. Again, as I previously stated, management team is very important to ensure governance. Again, these are unit drivers. So you need two things, right? Once you have the secret sauce, or I call it the mousetrap that you have invented, you need to figure out a way to ensure upsell and retention. All of these are important, but retention and upsell are the upsell capacity, right? Or most of the startups that are there in India are not profitable because they're ensuring upsell capacity over a period of time. So they are ensuring that you retain the customer, but they will upsell in the future. So if you don't have upsell capacity, negative unit economics doesn't work. Most of the unicorns will not be unicorns. They're unicorns because they have upsell capacity and they will want to keep that for a long period of time. These are things that you might read in a business school. The point I underline retention and upsell being the most important. CAC is also very important. If your customer acquisition cost is too high, then when you compare customer acquisition cost with lifetime value, which is the LTV here, you need to figure out your cumulative customer acquisition cost should be less than the lifetime value of the consumer. That equation can never be violated. If that is violated, then your business is unviable. Again, so these are for unit economics. For unit growth, so this is, I'm talking about volume growth. You're basically looking at TAM, expanding TAM, efficiency in billing and growth. That's where you need companies like Zoho. Sales and marketing investment. You need a marketing channel to get your brand out there so that people understand the unique value proposition you bring to the table, and the profitability, which is actually free cash flow. Again, I'm restating the same things that I've had here. Multipliers give you the revenue and reach. Levers help you reduce time, cost, resources. So levers are internal efficiency tools. Multipliers are external efficiency tools. Okay, that's the broad categorization. Now, again, so when you're developing a new company, you're in this stage. This is how your finances will look like. And your burn multiple, which is how much money you burn to get a rupee of new revenue into the company, is very high. Usually, for every 5 rupees spent, you'll probably earn half a rupee or 1 rupee. Over a period of time, you have to get here, meaning 5 years down the line, your business models have to account to reaching a gross margin of 80% with 15% spent on R&D. So eventually, if you are a stable business, you'll have ratios like this. The R&D budget will be 1/3 of sales and marketing budget, or sales and marketing budget is 3 times the R&D budget. If you hit that, then you're a stable company, and you can do all the, you can list publicly if you meet these criteria. That means you're stable. Now, these criteria are not as important because there are listed companies which don't fit the criteria, are still listing because they see infinite growth because India is a big country, like Paytm or Zomato. Again, I'm giving you what a venture-backed company statistic. In this slide, I'm comparing a venture-backed company and a company which was bootstrapped, what it will look like. Both of them, it depends on what business you're in. Some businesses you have to raise money. some businesses you need not have to raise money, but it's a good idea to raise money. Okay, so do you guys have any questions at this point? I think I'm pretty much, yeah. Okay, I'll just plug as to what we do. So apart from an IoT company, we also do outdoor advertising. If you guys are interested in how we do it and things of that nature, you can always reach out to us. This is essentially some of the things that we have done as a company. Do reach out to us for anything that you have in terms of asking questions, in terms of business models that you have, or anything of that nature. That's pretty much it. If you have any questions for me, I would like to take them, or we'll wrap it up.